On Valentine's Day, February 14, 1988, a man collecting aluminum cans from a trash dumpster by the intersection between the Millen Bypass and Old Perkins Road just north of Millen, Georgia, in Jenkins County, found a female body inside a brown nylon suitcase. She had died of asphyxiation and was wrapped in plastic and duct tape. A pillow was found with her, and investigators believe she may have been smothered to death. Investigators estimated she had been dead for around 4 to 7 days before being discovered. Unfortunately, there was no identification on the victim. She became known as Jane Millen Doe and Jenkins County Jane Doe. Since they had no photo of what the victim looked like alive, they brought in a forensic artist to draw a sketch of her. Over the years, they attempted to identify her using fingerprints and dental records, but nothing came of it. In 1991, investigators received a phone call from a man named Johnny Young, who confessed to the murder. He had been a person of interest in the case since 1988 and was allegedly seen with the woman before her death. However, after being located in New Jersey, he denied making the phone call and has since passed away. In 2023, 36 years later, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations sent her DNA to Othram, who was able to create a DNA profile. From this, their in-house forensic genetic genealogy team got to work and was eventually able to provide some leads to detectives. Finally, in October of 2023, Jenkins County Jane Doe was identified as 26-year-old Chong Un Kim. Chong was born in 1962 in North Korea and moved to the United States in 1981, 7 years before her murder. Between 1981 and 1988, she lived in Hinesville, Georgia. Not much else is known about Chong, and investigators are now trying to identify Chong's killer, but as of 2023, this case remains unsolved. Ebony Monique Giddens was born on December 23, 1990. In 2018, 27-year-old Ebony was living in an apartment on Montclair Drive in Columbus, Georgia, with 2 of her 3 sons, aged 5 and 2. On the morning of March 12th, her brother Alvin came to pick up the children for school as he usually did, but when he knocked on the door, there was no answer. He then tried calling and texting Ebony, but received no response there either. He then reached out to Roderick Daniel, the father of her 2 younger children, but he hadn't spoken with her since yesterday. Concerned about his children, Roderick came to the apartment, and together they continued knocking and ringing the doorbell. Finally, his 5-year-old son came to the door and said Ebony wasn't home. They checked the apartment just to be sure and found her purse, wallet, and keys, but no sign of Ebony. At that point, they called the police and reported her missing. During the investigation, they discovered that Ebony spoke with a relative around 11 p.m. the night before, and the relative said everything seemed fine. At the time, Ebony was dating a man named Malcolm Jackson, and a week before she vanished, Jackson had allegedly jumped on her, hit her in the face, busted her lip, and then put a gun to her head and threatened to kill her. Jackson was arrested for the incident on March 10th and charged with misdemeanor assault. Unfortunately, he was able to bail out the same day. Her family was unaware of the abuse and found out that it had been going on for a while. If they argued while out and about, Jackson would leave her in the middle of the street and she would have to find a way to get home. After being released, he called Ebony numerous times, even though he was ordered to stay away from her. The day before Ebony disappeared, neighbors saw him working on her car. The day after her disappearance, Jackson was jailed again on charges of aggravated stalking and felony probation violation. A year later, Jackson was on trial for aggravated assault, possession of a firearm, and stalking Ebony. He made the decision to represent himself, which Ebony's family said was a disaster and hard to watch. They said he basically made a mockery of the justice system and made the evidence a joke. As you can expect, things did not go well for him, and he was ultimately sentenced to a total of 35 years behind bars. 20 years for the assault, 5 years for the possession of a firearm, and 10 years for the stalking, all to be served consecutively. Ebony's family, who feel that Jackson is involved in her disappearance, were happy about the sentencing. Ebony's sons are now in the care of their fathers, and as of 2023, she has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Keeslyn Noelle Roberts was born to parents Shannon and Eric on January 10, 1999. In 2020, 20-year-old Keeslyn was living in Resaca, Georgia, where she had unfortunately begun using drugs after getting mixed up with a bad crowd. She had gotten in trouble and was on probation, but was starting to get her life back on track. On January 18, 2020, Keeslyn was at the Flying J truck stop on Resaca Beach Boulevard. I do want to note that there was no beach even remotely close to here, and have no clue why they named the street that. While at the Denny's, Keeslyn went into the kitchen and began arguing with an employee. The staff called the police, but she left before they arrived. While fleeing, she dropped her backpack, which contained cash, a phone charger, a wallet, car keys, a debit card, and a driver's license. After leaving, she has never been heard from again. 2 days later, Keeslyn's dad, Eric, found her car in the parking lot of the truck stop with some of her belongings inside it. Also, some of her clothes were found stashed in a bush by the dumpsters in the back of the restaurant, but her cell phone has never been found. A 21-year-old man named Caleb Nathaniel Smith had disappeared from the same truck stop on January 16th, 2 days before Keeslyn's disappearance. However, authorities could find no evidence that Caleb and Keeslyn's cases were connected or that they even knew each other. Caleb told his grandma that he was going to the nearby city of Rome to hang out with friends for a few hours. He told her to leave the deadbolt unlocked because he planned to return home that night. Caleb stopped for gas at the Flying J, 30 miles from Rome, Georgia, and was seen entering the store at 12:32 a.m. The gas station camera shows one male customer sitting alone at a table in the Denny's section of the gas station. You can then see Caleb sit down at a different table facing the man. A few minutes later, he called his grandma to tell her where he was and that he didn't have enough gas to get to Rome. He told her he would ask the man at the Flying J for $5 for gas. While Caleb went over and spoke with the man twice, it's unknown if the man ever gave him money. After the second interaction, Caleb sat back down alone at the table facing the man. He then got up and left the gas station, never to be seen alive again. Caleb's grandma started getting very worried when he didn't return home that morning. She then drove to the Flying J and found his car parked in the back of the building, out of sight of any cameras. She spotted a suspicious white Nissan nearby and decided not to get out of the car. Instead, she called 2 family members to come to the gas station. Once they arrived, the white car drove off. It's theorized that the white car was parked there waiting to make a drug deal. She found Caleb's car unlocked with his keys on the floorboard. His cell phone was found in the glove compartment with the battery removed and sitting next to the phone. His car had a half a tank of gas and was not almost empty, as he told his grandma. His jacket was also left behind in the car, which was strange because it was a very cold night. At that point, his family reported him missing. Officials say on January 16th and 17th, deputies searched the area around the truck stop, both on the ground and in the air, but their search yielded no results. It is also worth noting that the county sheriff's office never processed Caleb's car for evidence. On February 3rd, his body was found 5 miles away from the gas station in a marshy, overgrown area of the county between the Sugar Valley and Hill City communities. His death was then ruled an accident after a toxicology report showed he died from meth intoxication. Caleb was found without socks or shoes, but there were multiple shoe prints near his body. Strangely, despite the muddy, marshy area, he had no mud on the bottom of his feet. So did he die elsewhere and his body was dumped here? To this day, his clothes and shoes have never been recovered. The most plausible theory is that Caleb bought meth from the guy he encountered or someone else at the gas station. He and whoever he bought it from most likely used the drugs together, but Caleb ended up overdosing and his body was disposed of. As for Keeslyn, her father did admit that she had also been using meth. Plus, the reason she was on probation was because she was arrested for selling meth. It's possible that this particular Flying J is a known drug dealer spot, and that both Caleb and Keeslyn bought drugs and then overdosed. If she was high on meth, it could explain her erratic behavior inside the Denny's. However, as of 2023, Keeslyn has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Randisha Love was born to Katara Ham on December 3, 1988, and was the sister to 3 brothers. Her mother, Katara, said her daughter loved to sing and dance and typically had a smile on her face. In 2016, 17-year-old Randisha, who was a junior at Westlake High School in Fulton County, Georgia, had just moved into the College Park neighborhood with her mother, siblings, and grandparents. She was part of the ROTC and had plans to join the Air Force after graduation. On January 12th, Randisha left for school just like normal and texted her mother, letting her know she made it on the bus. Once school was over and Randisha was back home, she called her mother around 4:30 to let her know she made it home safely. Sadly, this would be the last time Katara would ever talk to her daughter again. On that particular day, Randisha was unfortunately home alone because her grandparents were with one of her siblings in California for a funeral, while another sibling was at basketball practice. Katara got off work at 7:30 p.m. and headed to pick her son up from practice. After that, they drove through Wendy's to get dinner. During that time, Katara tried calling Randisha, but there was no answer. While this worried Katara, she kept it to herself, thinking Randisha might just be listening to music. However, it was strange that her calls were going straight to voicemail. After arriving home at about 9 p.m., Randisha's brother went into the house first, through the unlocked front door. Once Katara was inside, she found her son staring at Randisha's body, which was lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood. She had sadly been shot to death a total of 5 times. Uncertain if the assailant was still in the home, Katara took her son and fled to a nearby church, where they called the police. Once they arrived back at the house, the police were already there. Katara said her daughter was very responsible and always locked the door. This has led investigators to believe she possibly knew her murderer. Also, there was nothing taken from the home, and Randisha had not been sexually assaulted, so they've been unable to determine a motive. The family was new to the neighborhood and hadn't even met their neighbors. The only people Randisha had most likely met were kids from school. As for her phone activity that day, she had only made 2 calls, and both were to her mother. While detectives had been investigating some leads, there has been nothing solid, and no witnesses have come forward. It's now been over 7 years since Randisha was murdered, and as of 2023, this case remains unsolved. Twins Jeannette Latrice and Dannette Latonia Millbrook were born on April 2, 1974, to parents John and Mary Sturgis, who went by Louise. Their father, John, wasn't involved in their lives, leaving Dannette and Jeannette solely in the hands of Louise. In 1990, 15-year-old Dannette and Jeannette were living in Augusta, Georgia, with their multiple siblings. Jeannette was described as a sweet girl who loved kids and animals and was more reserved than her sister. Dannette, on the other hand, was a bit louder and always stood up for Jeannette if she needed it. On Sunday morning, March 18th, the girls walked to the local Christ Presbyterian Church on Laney Walker Boulevard, where they were given money by the pastor to buy food. Afterward, they walked to Church's Chicken, bought food, and made the 15 to 20-minute walk back home to Cooney Circle. Once home, they told their mother that an unknown man had been following them in a white van. The girls had recently switched schools and were now attending Lucy Laney High School. It's unclear why the girls switched schools, but the new school didn't have a bus, which forced them to take public transportation, and that wasn't free. So they asked Louise for bus fare, but she told them to go ask their godfather, Ted. Ted lived on Forest Street, which was a couple of miles away. So after lunch, the girls began their walk to Ted's home. Once there, he gave them $20 for bus fare and a few extra dollars to get some snacks. After leaving, they walked one street over to Tin Cup Lane to visit their cousin Juanita. They asked if she would go along and spend the night, but her mother said no. They continued on in what I would describe as the opposite direction of their home and ended up at their older sister Sanders' home on Pickett Avenue. They were clearly scared of something and asked if she would walk them home. Could the white van have been following them again? Unfortunately, a Sander had recently given birth and declined. After leaving a Sanders home, they began walking southwest on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and stopped at the Pump and Shop gas station on the corner of 12th Street. The clerk, Gloria, who knew the girls, said they came in and purchased candy, chips, and soda. Sadly, after leaving the store, they were never seen again. When they failed to return home, Louise called and reported them missing. Unfortunately, she was told to wait 24 hours, which she did. Once the report was filed, the detective immediately listed the girls as runaways instead of abductees. This frustrated Louise because Dannette and Jeannette were well-behaved girls who had never run away. Detectives never even lifted a hand in the case and instead passed it over to a juvenile officer. So the family, along with church members, were left to search for the girls on their own. They began handing out flyers and retracing their steps and spoke to anyone who might have seen them walking. On April 8, 1991, over a year later, investigators said the girls were now 17 years old and no search would ever take place. I mean, seriously, how worthless could these detectives be? However, get ready because there is a shocking twist in this case. On April 8, 1993, 6 days after the twins' 19th birthday, the investigator on their case came to Louise's home and told her that Dannette and Jeannette had been located. He said they were in the foster care system and had been adopted. Of course, these rock star detectives couldn't have gotten this wrong, could they? I mean, I'm sure they went and set eyes on the twins, right? Nope, they just took the organization's word for it and had them removed from the missing persons website. 23 years later, in 2013, a newly elected sheriff reopened the case and put out a reward for information that would lead to their whereabouts. Finally, things were moving with the new sheriff, right? Nope, they talked about the case once and never spoke of it again. In 2019, the Oxygen Channel produced a documentary about the twins and questioned the lead detective at the time, Jim Shipp. However, he refused to be interviewed on camera, but responded when asked about the twins, "Oh yeah, those two runaways." He also said that, allegedly, the principal at the school had told him the girls were known for getting in trouble and at one point left the school and never returned. However, the principal has since passed away and the information could not be corroborated. Shipp also admitted to never laying eyes on the twins when he had them removed from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children's website. When asked if he believed the twins were still alive, he mustered up all the arrogance he could and laughed, saying, "I don't see any reason why they couldn't be. If you find two dead twins, you let me know." He then insulted Louise by saying he contacted her once a week, and if she didn't remember, it must be because of her low IQ. If Dannette and Jeannette were kidnapped, one possible suspect was the Shaw Creek killer, Joseph Patrick Washington. He had lived in Augusta and worked at a local brickyard near where the twins lived. He also had to pass the pump and shop on his way home from work. In 1996, he was convicted of murdering 5 women and sentenced to 17 consecutive life terms. His motive for the murders was because he said his ex-girlfriend infected him with HIV. He owned multiple cars and would switch them up on a daily basis. Unfortunately, he was never questioned in their disappearance because he died in 1999. Another person of interest is the girl's father, John Millbrook, who lived nearby. He was known to be involved in drugs and to have a criminal record. Reggie Cummings and Ernest Fonz were 2 of his closest friends, and Millbrook was imprisoned for assisting them in concealing the body of someone they murdered. While Ernest was in prison, the Fall Line podcast wrote him a letter asking if he knew what happened to the twins. He responded, claiming he might know where they could be found. The podcast submitted the information to the Richmond County Sheriff's Department, but nothing was ever done with it. A former prosecutor and former homicide detective who worked on the documentary with Oxygen wrote Ernest a letter asking to speak with him about the case. When they went to his daughter April Vaughn's house to make the phone call, Ernest was unfortunately unable to speak. However, April told them that the girls weren't alive and that Ernest knew who did it and where they were buried. When they finally made contact with him, he claimed he was there the night they went missing. He said the girls had gone to see their father, who lived on 3rd Street. Ernest, who was only 12 years old when the twins went missing, stated that one of the twins began drinking and smoking weed. Some of the males attempted to take advantage of her, and when the other twin noticed, she spoke up. One of the men was offended by her rejection and hit her, causing her to fall and hit her head on the table. Then someone told everyone to go, but Ernest refused to reveal that person's name. Ernest stated he didn't know where the bodies were, but said they should check Mary Brothers' Brickyard ponds, where bodies were often hidden. When asked about a white van, he mentioned Oodle Boy and Lil Cheese, known drug dealers, and said Lil Cheese had his way with one of the twins that night. In another shocking twist, April told the Oxygen documentary crew that investigators had told her father to make up the entire story. Also, the police have since said that Ernest's story was real, but referring to another set of murders and not the Millbrook twins. As for their father, John Millbrook, he had ties to the serial killer Joseph Washington and was allegedly not concerned with the twins' disappearance. He eventually developed dementia and has since passed away. However, before he passed, his daughter asked him what happened to her sisters, and he responded, "I think they're dead." It's now been over 30 years since they went missing, and as of 2023, they've never been found, and this case remains unsolved.